Hi, I'm Tiffany, and I'm very afraid of insects. I agree that this is not an unusual phobia, and many people have it, but my case is not quite that simple. The fact is that these insects were under my skin. Yes, they were right under my skin. How did they get there? Now I'll tell you everything. But in the meantime, subscribe to our channel and share my story with your friends. So, my older sister India and I lived together because we lost our parents in a car accident many years ago. I don't remember everything very well because I was just a baby, but my sister remembers with horror the day when they went on business and suddenly in the middle of the night, the police called and said that there was an accident. Indy couldn't believe it for a long time, full of confidence that this was a mistake. She immediately called our mother on the phone, but she didn't answer. I was only 3 years old at the time. In a state of shock, she ran to the police station, taking me in her arms. And the sight that I saw is the only vivid memory from my childhood. I saw my mother. She was lying on the ground, and a stranger had covered her with a white sheet. He covered her face, and I thought how she would breathe. She must be uncomfortable. Indy sat down on the ground, hugged me, and began to cry loudly. I suddenly wanted to go to my mother so much, but they wouldn't let me. From that day on, my sister and I lived together. I still remember how she took me and herself to a psychologist. I still don't understand why. That aunt in the white coat warned us that we might have consequences due to psychological damage. Man, I didn't even know what the word damage meant. I often asked where our parents were, and each time, Indy reacted the same way, crying. At first, our relatives helped us. They often came to our home, brought food, gave money, played with me, and when time passed, Indy left school and went to work. Then she looked for a nanny for me and found an old woman who was half deaf and blind, but, as my sister said, not so expensive. It was only then that I realized that my mom and dad would never come back. Sometimes I cried at night, sometimes we cried together, but I saw less of Indy because she was so busy. That's how we grew up, dramatically matured due to circumstances. Our neighbors have been visiting us for many years, and some of them still do. They also bring us food, help with repairs around the house, with some serious papers. My mother was sociable. As my sister says, she was friends with everyone around her and was always friendly, which is why everyone loved our family. I grew up and Indy sent me to school. There I was also treated with sympathy and understanding. It was annoying to some extent, but on the other hand, it was nice. When I started my transition age, I suddenly began to often remember the picture of the accident, and one detail did not leave my head: insects. For some reason, there were a lot of spiders or bugs under my feet. I wanted to crush them all, but I couldn't move because of my sister's embrace. And one night, I had a dream that I was in a room filled with insects. They surrounded me and attacked. Then I woke up from fear, and how I would scream. Indy came running to calm me down. But soon, the nightmare continued. I remember sitting in a chemistry class, writing a lecture in my notebook, and I felt like something was moving inside my hand. I got scared, started scratching it, hitting it with my other hand, and screamed in horror, jumped up from the chair, and it stopped. I looked up and realized that the entire class was looking at me. It turns out that I also hooked my hand on a cone of sulfuric acid, which spilled and ate everything that was on the table. Indy was called to school. At home, when we talked, I said that I feel like I have insects running under my skin. She certainly didn't believe me and sternly told me not to behave like this anymore. The vile creatures came back to me that night. I saw something crawling under the blanket, and as soon as I put it away, I saw something crawling up my legs, and it was also moving under my skin. I jumped out of my seat again, waving my arms and yelling like a mad woman. Indy immediately came running and said, "You don't have anything there. You just think you do." This offended me because it meant that she thought I was crazy and I wasn't. These spiders or beetles began to live all over my body, and each time brought me to hysteria. It has already become so common to frighten me to death in a store, in class, at home, or on a walk with friends. And constantly complaints were brought to my sister. I already lied to her, tried to hide it, but she didn't believe me. In the end, she took me back to the psychiatrist. I resisted, shouting that I'm not crazy, that I really have something inside and it needs to be removed. During the therapy session, I refused to talk until the spiders started moving again in my stomach area. I lifted my t-shirt and showed it to Indy and the doctor. I said, "Look, see, I'm not lying. Here they are." And I showed them my hand. Well, how can they not notice it? Because they are so huge. At this point, the doctor calmed me down, gave me water and sedatives. After 10 minutes, when the medicine took effect and the insects calmed down, I turned on a big TV video. I saw myself on the screen. It turns out that our entire session was recorded on camera. The picture clearly showed me jumping up from my chair, lifting my t-shirt and showing the insects, which weren't there. I asked to review the video again and again, but it was clearly visible that there were no insects or movements on my skin. All I felt was fear, despair, and sadness. I just started crying because I thought it meant I was a psychopath. "Indy, don't send me to the psych ward," I shouted to my sister, and she also started crying, but said that she would not give me to anyone for anything. All we had to do was visit a psychologist, and I continued my treatment. As it turned out, these were the consequences after the loss of my parents. It was about them that we were warned once. The only thing I'm most happy about is that we managed to hide the moment of my treatment in front of my neighbors and my friends. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. In general, this was my case. I went to the doctor for about a year because the emotional wound was bigger than we thought. But fortunately, everything went away and I feel much better, and so does my sister. By the way, we got a kitten at home to distract us, relieve stress, and relax. It really worked. Our cat immediately chose a place to sleep on my bed, so it was even better. My sleep became better, knowing that I was protected by a furry pet. I advise that to everyone. What do you know about arguments and excitement? I think I know almost everything. My name is Milana, and I was born in Las Vegas. Even my place of birth speaks for itself. Excitement is in my blood. My parents met during a game of poker. My father was a player, and my mother was the one who dealt the cards. She was working in a casino at the time. Dad won many times and then lost, and after each loss came to take revenge. So they flirted with each other for about a couple of weeks, and then he finally decided to ask her out. 6 months later, they were married at the same casino where my mother worked. Over time, father got a job there in order to simultaneously protect her from other men's bribes. My mother was a prominent one, so we always had playing cards in the house, unnecessary chips. I remember when I was growing up, my mom and dad always played together in the evenings and taught me. When I was 6 years old, I was a master at playing cards. When I was 8, I played with my parents and even won sometimes. I liked the feeling of victory. It was also interesting to plunge into the game. You never know what is waiting for you, and it was fascinating. Well, the coolest thing started when I entered school. Oh, how many times my parents were called because I was playing in the back. But I was interested in watching the surprised faces of my classmates. They were so attentive to my hands, to the tricks that I learned to do with cards. After school, we chose a place in the park, Square Park, and I just played. Or rather, I taught the children how to lay out cards, cheat unnoticeably, and place bets based on the behavior and condition of the player. Well, I couldn't help it. This attention that I received from the environment was too sweet, and over time, I got used to it. I was like the card queen of the class. There was no one who could surpass my skill in sleight of hand. However, this did not last long. My crown was removed from my head by our new classmate. He came in the middle of the year, moved with his parents from another city. When I started to lay out the next set of cards, he came up to us at recess and stared at my hands. I noticed it, and I thought, am I just imagining it? But I wasn't. In just a fraction of a second, he snatched the cards out of my hands and began almost juggling them, performing tricks that I'm still trying to learn. Oh, he's a scoundrel. Before my eyes and in the eyes of my classmates, my authority was failing. Now the title of the best is no longer mine, and I was not worthy. I was so angry, but I didn't even know his name. So I snatched my deck out of his hands and told him to go to hell. I came home in a bad mood. I was very angry with him. Why did this happen? What the hell? Why was he in my class? How do I use my fame now? I spent the whole evening complaining about it to my mother, and she just laughed and then advised me to have a fair fight for the title of the card leader in the class. I didn't immediately understand what that meant. My mother explained that if I do not want to fall face down in the dirt in front of the guys, I must prove not only the skill of sleight of hand, I must also prove that I also have a character of steel, that I am not afraid of competition, and I do not perceive defeat as anything but a springboard to the sky. Yes, it's decided. I will fight tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, carefully selected my wardrobe, and went to school determined. I brought my best deck of cards, which my father gave me. They were the first in my life and always brought good luck. After school, I suggested that Maximilian, as he was called, play a game of 21, and he agreed. We met in the park, and our classmates gathered around us. It was quite a sight for them. I've never been so nervous before a game as I was that time. What do you think? I started losing right away. I demanded revenge again and again, and I was unlucky. I already thought that maybe he was cheating, but no matter how hard I tried to see his face, mood, and facial expressions, everything seemed to be clear. This can't be happening, I shouted, throwing my cards on the ground. I was so angry that I could have kicked him in the face. We played for hours on end. My hands were already cramping and my head was aching from the exertion. I couldn't believe I was losing to Maximilian. It wasn't my day. I took my bag and went home angry. My mother listened to my emotional story and said that with such strong enemies, it is better to stay close, so it will be more useful to be his friend. But I wasn't going to be friends with someone who had trampled on my reputation. All the next day at school, I didn't talk to anyone, much less look in Maximilian's direction. I was disgusted by him. But suddenly, he came up to me during lunch and offered to eat at the diner after school. He must be up to something, I thought. I was about to tell him to go away, but I suddenly remembered my mother's advice about enemies. Okay, I told him. As agreed, I met with him after class. Max immediately started with a case. I know you're mad at me. You were the best card player here before I came along, but I didn't play you on purpose. It's just the way I am. I play well, and you make a few mistakes. I don't want to compete with you, but if you want to prove your coolness, let's choose a neutral battlefield. Let the guys come up with tests for us, and we will pass them, he said. I sipped my milkshake and knew he was right. That's what I needed. I agreed, and we agreed with our classmates to go camping next weekend. Our classmates tried hard enough. They came up with such crazy tasks that some of them wanted to scream with fear. Marguerite came up with a competition to see who could drink a liter of water faster. Mark gave us a speed run. Donna came up with chemistry and math problems. And Trinity asked us to sing a song. Let's take a bet. Who will eat a kilo of worms? George asked us. Max just frowned. The score was the same, so it was the last and decisive contest. I couldn't back down, and my blood was racing. I shouted, trying not to imagine what was waiting for me. Maximilian looked at me, as did all the other boys, with great surprise. Look, you don't have to do this. I've already realized that you are a stubborn person, Maximilian said, but I gave my word and I had to keep it. Then George handed me a kilo of jelly worms and said, "You win." Oh, yes! I won! It was a contest for stubbornness and fortitude. I made it! Everyone was laughing at George's great prank, and Max shook my hand. I was happy and finally calmed down. All in all, it was just a crazy day. And since then, Max and I have become friends because we have so many interests in common, right?